Hello my friends, it's the Game Boy Geek here, and today we find ourselves in our very own magic school, where you'll be guiding your own masters and apprentices in manipulation of the mystic stones. You'll be trying to build arcane towers capable of channeling the power of the past civilizations. But you'll need to be careful, since inattentive apprentices can be imprisoned in the towers for eternity. The Towers of Arkhanos is for 2 to 4 players, takes 20 to 30 minutes to play, and it's for ages 14 and up, and it's published by Creative Game Studio. It's a dice drafting, tower building game that's fun and family friendly. Now this game is on Kickstarter right now, and I'm going to give you an overview of the game, how it works, and then I'll see you on the other side. This is a Kickstarter preview, so all the art and components I show here are prototype and are subject to change. You'll want to check the Kickstarter page and the link of the description of this video to see all the final art and components. At the beginning of the game, each player is going to get a spell book. They're going to select one of these colors and the name of their school. Protectives of Gaia, Crimson Brotherhood, etc. And once that's been selected, that player is going to get some apprentices and a master. Now here is the game set up, and what we have here are different towers. So here we have 3 outside towers, and then we have a central tower. Over the course of the game, it's going to be played over a certain number of rounds depending on the player count, and each round a certain amount of dice are going to be rolled, also depending on the player count. Now these dice are going to end up being drafted by each player on their turn and being placed into one of the towers, and you're going to be placing your apprentices or masters along with them. You're going to be scoring points when you place them, and you're also going to be trying to score prestigious points when you finish one of these towers for majority. So let's go over how a turn works. So there's a bag of dice, and the start player, who is the last person that has been in a tower, will take a certain amount of dice depending on the amount of players, and they'll roll them like this. Notice that there's different numbers, of course, and different colors, but also notice there's different colors of dice out in the different towers. And what this means is if you want to place one of these dice out in these towers, it has to match the color that's there, at least in these specific tiles. So the first player can actually, let's just say, take this die and place it in this tile. This one needs a pink 1 or 2. And when you place a die, you're going to place it in any open pillar that's there, and then you'll activate an ability. Now this one here just gives you 2 prestige points. So in this case, I could place a 1 here, and I would also place my, in this case, either an apprentice or a master. You can choose from your supply, and I'm going to place it right on that little meeple place right there. Now I've placed that die. It would then be the next player's turn clockwise. They would draft a die and place it somewhere like that. Now, this one says 1 or 2, but the numbers can repeat. So if there was a 1 pink here, it could be placed on one of these 2 from any of the other players as well. And so since we got 2 prestige points for placing there, that was the ability of that pillar's spot, we got the 2 prestigious points here. And these are, you can put them down so that other people can't see how many points you have. So let's say it's the next player's turn. They're going to take this orange 6, and let's say they place it right here. This allows them to, well, they get to place either their master or apprentice, assuming it's available in their pool, in that spot, and then they'll also take this ability. What that ability does is allows you to take another meeple or apprentice or master from your supply and place it on any of the other pillars that are out there. And let's say they just go like this. Now, a couple of things about this. Number one is this is going there. It's basically blocking someone else from placing a die there and getting that 2 points later. But also, whenever you do that, most of the apprentices and masters that you put out there with a die, all the ones with dice, will actually get removed once this gets filled up and scored, which I'll show you in just a bit. However, the ones that get moved like that will actually stay. So it's kind of a give and take, because when you place them like this, they're going to be staying there the whole game. You won't get them back in your pool to use, and so the amount of different apprentices that you'll have in your pool will be less. So it's something to think about when you're doing that. Now here we have, let's say this player wants to put this purple die somewhere. Well, you can't put it here. This needs pink, this needs orange, and this needs white. This one, the central tower is always a wild. That's why it has every color there. So they can take this die, they can place it on any of these 3. It doesn't matter, they all do the same, and they can place their their meeple there. In this case, they've placed their master. We'll talk about why that's important later when we talk about majorities, but essentially the masters are going to be worth more influence than just the regular apprentices. And so let's say this player just puts this here, and they put their yellow apprentice there. Now, there'll always be one die at the end of the round. In a 3 or 4 player game, each player will have 1 turn. In a 2 player game, each player will have 2 turns before you get to having 1 die left. And when that happens, you're going to place it on the lowest round number. This mana pool essentially is counting the number of rounds in the game. And again, depending on the amount of players, it's either going to go 8 or 9 rounds. So this is used as a round counter. It also helps you out with scoring, which we'll go over in just a minute. But now that this round's over, the first player that started this with the bag will pass it to the left player, because this also acts as the first player marker. So then you do it again. You take out the dice, you roll it, and you continue doing this. So let's say it's the beginning of the next round. This is what has been rolled. And let's say this player is going to go here, and they're going to place a 2 orange here because they can do that. They're going to place an apprentice here. Now, this is the last ability on one of these tiles that I have not showed you. What this is, you immediately get amount of points equal to the level, because as you'll see, once these get completed, you're going to be building on top of these towers. This is considered level 1 because it's on the ground floor. So this player would get 1 prestige point immediately. And now let's say the next player takes this orange 2, places it here. This player, the blue player, will get 2 points immediately, but this is now going to score. Again, the numbers can repeat on these types of tiles. Now, we're going to look at influence here when we score. So in order to score this, once it gets filled, I've brought the mana pool, which has the scoring on there right next to this tile, just to make it easier to show you. You're going to count influence. Each of the apprentices is worth 1 influence. If there's any masters here, they'd be worth 2. And it's unfortunate because if you remember, the blue player put their master here earlier, so they did not have it available to place here. If they did, they would have tied. It would have been 2 to 2, but in this case, they had to place an apprentice, so they only have 1 influence, and the green player has 2. Now, this is an outside or an outer tower, and here you'll see that the outer towers are colored, and that shows you how these ones score. So whoever has the most influence is going to get 6 points. So the green player would get 6 of those prestige points and place it near their school. The second place player will get 4. Now in this case, you would then remove the apprentices and give them back to those players. And you'll do that only if they were placed along with a die. If you remember earlier, this apprentice was moved here from an ability on the tile, and when that's done, it basically stops a die from going there. So if this were the tile that was being resolved right now, it would actually be a tie. All 3 players have 1 influence, and in ties, all the tied players would get 3 prestige points. Now, if players tie for first place and there's still a second place, the second place won't get any points because the first place ties sort of stop the second player from getting anything. So in this case, these would get removed and given back to their players' pools because there were dice there. But this would stay there. Again, remembering that anytime you move one of those on, you're sort of losing the ability to place that later. Then you will take the top tile from this stack of tiles that was shuffled at the beginning of the game and placed off to the side, and you'll place it right on top of this. Remembering that sometimes there might be some meeples there that were left from before if they did not have a die. Just going to put right on there, so you're literally going to be building the tower here. Now look at this one. This one can use a 5 or a 6, either purple or pink, and again, you can repeat numbers for this one, and so on and so forth. But also keep in mind, the 3 abilities that we talked about earlier are on all of these tiles. So this one allows you to move a meeple from your pool to one of these tiles, and the spell book, which I'll go over in just a moment, 2 points, and then getting the points equal to the level of the floor. So let's speak about moving one of your apprentices. Now last time we showed you that, we took one from our pool, it was the green player actually, and we moved it to one of the open spots on one of the towers out there. But you can also instead, you place it on the die number that was. So for example, again, this could use pink or purple. Let's say they use a purple 5 to place here, and they place one of their apprentices here. They can then, because they placed a 5 here, and it tells them they can add one of their apprentices either to any other tile or onto their spell book, they can do that. It was a 5, so they can place it right here on the 5. Now these are going to activate different abilities that they'll be able to use. Anytime on a future turn, they can remove this, placing it back in their pool and activating that ability. However, if they have one of their apprentices on there and they get another move with the 5, they cannot put them on the spell book because you can only have 1 meeple in each spot. So let's go over some of these. This one would allow you, if you activate it, to add 1 or subtract one from your die. Lesson 3 would allow you to rotate the die to the other side. Lesson 4, Metamorphosis, would allow you to use your die as if it was any other color. Lesson 5 is an exchange. You could exchange your die with one from the mana pool. If you remember, the mana pool was that round tracker that we put the last die of each round. And lesson 6 is to duplicate. You'd get an extra die from the bag, you roll it, and then you pick any one of the die from the pool to put it back in the bag. And the last one I didn't talk about is when you activate this, you could choose any of these other ones to use. And if during the game you end up resolving a centaur, it scores the same way of the others. These would get taken off. You would give the influence as shown previously. It scores the same way. But when you take the tile, you're going to flip it to ensure that it is sort of the ceiling tile. These are always the floor on one side and the ceiling on the other, because this center tile always allows you to use any die color. Now here's the other tiles on the floor side that are sort of special, a little bit different from all the other ones. This one I already kind of showed you. You can use either color, but because it has numbers on there, they can repeat, meaning you can have a 5 or a 6 more than once, as long as it follows either one of those two colors. These ones, if you all see, they're different colored dice, but they all have a non-equal sign on them. What that means is, here you have to use this color die here, but once there's a die placed, you cannot place another one of that color there. So for instance, because a 1 pink was placed there, a 1 pink could not be placed on here until this is, completely scored and gone. And this is the same thing for the other colored dice. And as you can see, over the course of the game, you'll be building 3-dimensional towers. And this will continue until the 8th round is over with 2 or 4 players, or the 9th round is over with 3 players. Everyone would then count up their prestige points, and you'd get some final scoring as well. Each of the towers will also be looked at for influence, just as we did before. First place will get 3 points, second place gets 2 points. If there's a tie, they get 1 point each. Each player will also get 1 point for every meeple in their spell book, and then whoever has the most points is the winner. If it's tied, whoever has the most meeples in their spell book would win. And if it's still tied, the player has the most meeples on the top floors of the 4 different towers would win, and if it's still tied, you share the victory. Well, there you have the Towers of Arkhanos, and as I've shown in the overview, it's a fast family game that incorporates dice drafting and tower building. If you'd like to see the final art and components and all of the different pledge levels available, you can click the link below me in the description of this video, and it will take you right to the Kickstarter project page where you can come and be a master of the towers in Towers of Arkhanos. And I'm sure the fine folks at Creative Game Studios would love your support. This has been the Game Boy Geek, helping you find and enjoy the next board game you'll love.